Gladys Wee in the back, and Michelle Son. I've helped to put together this panel to introduce you to opportunities for Mitacs-funded internships. So for the rest of the event, my role is more or less ceremonial. I'm going to turn it over to to Allison Brennan, who is our liaison with Mitacs, and to faculty and grad students from FASS who actually have had experience with Mitacs-related projects. So if the people who are kind enough to be here and to be on our panel could come on up. And Nancy, you'll come join us? Okay, sure. And kindly joining us from Haida Gwaii is Marianne Ignace. All right, we're here. So let's get started. I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and then we'll go from there to our various panelists. Is that how you want to do it? Allison,
sure.
you want to say a couple minutes?
You want to do the introductions?
Oh, sure. Why don't I'll let everybody introduce themselves.
Okay. Thanks. Hi, my name is Allison Brennan, and thank you very much to the FASS Dean's Office for bringing everyone together today and for facilitating this exchange of experience and information. I'm in a role that is both through Mitacs, the organization, as well as SFU, the Dean of Graduate Studies, and the VPR office. And I will say more about the Mitacs bit as we move down, but that's all you get from me right now.
Hi, my name is Emma. I'm a PhD student here at SFU, but in the Surrey campus, so a bit far away. Yeah, I'm currently doing a Mitacs project, which I'm going to introduce a little bit later on.
Hi, I'm Julianne King. I just graduated from the Master of Urban Studies program, which is at the Vancouver campus, and I did a Mitacs internship earlier this year.
Hi, I'm Miriam Judah. I'm a postdoc in the psychology department here on Bellevue Mountain. I'm studying circadian rhythms and how light affects circadian rhythms, so we'll talk about that more later. And we need brighter light in here for sure. And I'm currently being funded by Mitacs.
Great. Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Weller. I'm the director of the School of Public Policy downtown, and I've supervised how many? 7, I can't lost count, Mitacs recipients, so we're a big champion and supporter of it.
Thanks. And Marianne, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us the department you're associated with?
Sure, I'm Marianne Ignace. I have joined the department in the Departments of Linguistics and First Nation Studies here at SFU, and I'm the director of a 7-year short partnership grant, First Nations Languages in the 21st Century, looking back, looking forward. And I have limited experience with Mitacs, having had a student in past years, and I would definitely welcome the opportunity to explore future Mitacs students in the Faculty of Arts, especially in the field I work in, Indigenous Languages Revitalization.
Well, thank you, everyone. And in terms of our audience, just to help we at the front here to understand, how many of you are graduate students? Excellent. And how many are faculty members or staff or otherwise? Okay, great. So we have a really nice mix. So thanks for joining us on this sunny Friday. My goal and Sean's goal, I'm going to speak for him right now, is to make this as much a collaborative, an exchange of knowledge as possible. So as you, the audience, have questions, please do chime in. From where I'm sitting at the intersection between SFU and Mitacs, and with the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences in particular. One of the key challenges and opportunities that I see is the actual development of partnerships. So I wanted to give enough time today so that the folks up here on the panel can speak about their experiences with how they started their work with their partner organizations. Partner organizations in Mitacs can either be for-profit companies or not-for-profit community organizations, and this can include just about everything that you can think of. And so that's, I think, maybe the best place to start. So to the first question of the panel here being, so how did you get to know your partner organization?
I can hold this. Yeah, so most of my research, I do it at the Digital Health Hub that is located in Surrey, and we work very closely with the Innovation Boulevard. So we work with a bunch of different companies, stakeholders, investors, and yeah, it was through those connections that I got to know a little bit better Innovation Boulevard, which is the partner company that I'm working with.
I was introduced to this project through my supervisor. My supervisor, Meg Holden, works with the Vancouver Foundation, which is the partner organization in my internship. They work together fairly often, and Meg had known that there was an opportunity for some research to be done, and she knew that I was looking for some opportunities to do research, and she connected us. So it was through our department, our faculty, my supervisor.
Okay, so I was really frustrated with how much my field is stuck in academia, and I feel that there's so much application of what we do in the real world, and so I started basically like a consulting company myself. Just started a website and started to call people in the city and write emails. And you'd be surprised, especially if you use your SFU email, how many people actually respond and are interested to meet for coffee or meet up. And so I did a lot of that. So I've met lots of different people from health authorities, government, WorkSafe BC, BC Hydro, health authorities, and also industry, who are actually interested in what we do as researchers. And so one of the collaborations that I'm involved in right now with Mitacs is BC Hydro. And it really was an email to he's an engineer at BC Hydro, but he's also the president of the Illuminating Engineering Society. I mean, I just Googled what is out there, who's working with lights, and they were very excited to meet a researcher who's actually researching things they are interested in. And but what I got to say is that sometimes when you contact people, make sure to contact them again. So my most valuable contacts right now are often people who didn't reply to my first email, which is very, very strange. Like, for example, BC Hydro. Later on, I heard that they were actually looking for a researcher for their projects. And here I was writing to them, "Hi, I'm a researcher in light and circadian rhythms, and would you like to meet?" And I don't understand why he didn't right away make that connection and wrote back, but I guess people are really busy. And luckily, I was brave enough to not be completely depressed after not hearing back from him, and just took the phone and just called him, and then got an appointment, and suddenly they were, "Well, we're having all these studies we'd like to do, and we're looking for a researcher." So, I think there's something to be said about just getting in touch with people in your community, and opportunities, I think, come easier than you might think.
Let me ask you a question. Did you make those contacts first and then find out about Mitacs, or did you mention Mitacs when you were making the contacts?
Yeah, so I knew about Mitacs, but at first I made the contact, and then I saw, I actually contacted Allison and talked to her. I was like, listen, I'd like to know when there's an opportunity for me. I'd like to understand more what Mitacs can offer. And so Allison met with me and Ralph to discuss what Mitacs is, and that's where I was aware. And then when an opportunity came up, I proposed it.
So like many of my colleagues up here, it came through the community. We're a school of public policy. We have a co-op program, and we engage with many community partners to try to get them to hire our students. So when Mitacs broadened its scope to move from, including the social sciences and other areas, not just the STEM fields, and it also broadened its scope to include not-for-profit instead of for-profit entities, that opened up a huge array of opportunities, which with our co-op coordinator and I, we quickly said, this is great because we deal with a lot of community partners that don't have a lot of cash. They'd love to have the research done or have the student come in and do it, but they're cash constrained. So the leverage of their money with the Mitacs money enables them to engage in these projects. So we started with various one-off things, and maybe I'll wait to tell the Eco-Trust story. That's a longer story, and it's a really happy story, so you'll have to wait on that. But it is building those networks with the community, and it's a value proposition that people find hard to resist. You get, as you've all said, incredible research at a bargain basement price compared to what they would have to spend to get the kind of quality research which is vetted and certified by their faculty supervisors. So not only do you get, enthusiastic young researchers, you get the quality control. And, when you say this to companies, they're kind of like, well, we could spend $100,000 hiring some consulting company who'd give us pretty pictures, or we could get real research done.
Marianne, could you tell us how you first came into contact with Mitacs?
It was actually after I received and became the director of the Shared Partnership Grant that I attended in orientation for partnership grant directors organized by SHIRT. And we had a presentation from Mitacs encouraging applications and explaining the process. There's a terrible echo here. I don't know if you can hear.
Yeah, you sound good to us.
Oh, okay, so I'll just have to speak slowly so I can hear my echo.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. I think what Allison, at this point, I think we'll go on and have people talk about their specific projects.
Maybe it's a good time. Good catch. Yeah. And this is why we have bottles and not glasses. It might be also a good time for me to just say a little bit about Mitacs itself, since it seems to be a bit of the elephant in the room in terms of what this thing is that we're all talking about, and then we can go into projects themselves.
Yes, good idea.
So Mitacs it has been around for now 20 years, 20 years in 2019, and it started here at SFU as a network of centers of excellence, and it now has the honor of, it's obviously no longer in its NCE funding cycle, but being the longest running NCE. In the early days, it was an organization that provided opportunities to students in mathematics to get outside the classroom and their ivory tower research and do applied work with companies and businesses in here in Vancouver. And since those early days, Mitacs has expanded to include all academic disciplines. and has expanded the scope of its partnerships to include not just for-profit companies, but as Nancy mentioned, not-for-profit organizations. And I will put in the plug also companies anywhere in the world, so companies in Canada or anywhere in the world. Mitacs, it is at the intersection between academia and research with partner organizations. Applications to Mitacs projects, they always involve three individuals. There's a faculty member at a Canadian university, there's a partner organization, and there's a graduate student or a postdoctoral fellow who's the living bridge in that sort of collaboration. Open to all academic disciplines and very much encouraged to expand outside the STEM fields. So the bulk of Mitacs projects across Canada and also still here at SFU, although SFU, I will say, is certainly leading the charge in non-STEM. The history of Mitacs and the M in Mitacs is actually mathematics from those early days. But so the history is in STEM, and so the challenge now is to get things off the ground and moving forward in those non-STEM fields, and that's one of the reasons why it's so exciting to be here with everyone today in order to push things like this forward. So Mitacs funding through the Accelerate program, which is the bulk of what we'll be talking about here today, it's built on blocks. Each block requires approximately $7,500 from a partner organization in order to get things off the ground. Mitacs provides a matching $7,500, and there's a $15,000 grant that is affixed to that block of research. The graduate student or postdoctoral fellow receives a minimum of $10,000 for their work on the project, and then there's $5,000 there in flexible funds that can go towards research expenses or travel, supplies, participant costs, anything like this, or they can also go as salary or stipend to the student who's working on the project. These blocks, that's one of them. They're like blocks. You can build bigger things with them. Master's students can do up to 4 of these blocks, PhD students up to 8, postdoctoral fellows 9. So it can be long-term research collaboration. So they don't have to be just quick one-off internships. They can be. But it can also be a sustainable source of funding to support research in collaboration with a partner throughout a degree program. And that's handy for faculty members to have in the back of their mind also when they're recruiting students into programs. I guess the other thing that I should say is that Mitacs is funded by the federal and the provincial governments very generously from the federal government with a $221 million grant that was announced in the 2017 budget. So Mitacs essentially has this unlimited pot of funds to provide to research partnerships. So unlike other funding agencies, these are non-competitive awards. There are no deadlines, and folks like me are here to help you get your applications up and running and successfully approved. So the weight of where you have to invest effort is different than than applying to Tri-Council with its whopping 10 or 15% acceptance rate for students. So there, all the effort goes into CVs and writing the applications. With Mitacs, the effort goes into developing partnerships, speaking with members of the community who may be interested in working with you. And once you have those partnerships, then the money comes from there. So that it's a bit of a shift in thinking about how and where to invest effort. But in some ways, it's more of a surefire thing, or at least a different way of approaching. With that, I would like to turn it back to the panel here, or maybe questions. Were there any kind of overarching questions before we go back to panel?
I'll be the guy who runs the Oh, and I've been told that if you mute that microphone when someone else is speaking, then...
Hi, my question is just how to define not-for-profit entities. So do health authorities and school boards, do they count, or because they're partly associated with government and they're overlapping?
Very good question. So things that are eligible that are not-for-profits, they have to be registered not-for-profits, and the three classes of things that really can't include are government at any level, federal, provincial, municipal, and that includes things like authorities, departments, school boards, fortunately. Universities, not eligible, and hospitals, not eligible. That said, there's often ways other individuals, eligible organizations that are at the table in these sorts of discussions. There's oftentimes a community partner that is arm's length from government that may be willing to step in and be the partner. So whenever you have one of those, definitely talk. I mean, especially in some of the health fields, there's very often something that's eligible, and then sometimes you'll get surprised, like Providence Healthcare, because it's a faith-based health organization, is actually eligible. Like, I know, like, who would have thought? So there's, I mean, if just ask, start the conversation. I'm happy to help mediate that process. That's what I'm here for.
And let me just say here, before I forget, if you're a grad student, you're probably wondering, well, how does this happen in the first place? And it's, at least for now, it's going to continue to be sort of an ad hoc kind of thing. There's a grad student in the English department who is going to be getting a Mitacs-funded internship starting somewhat shortly because one of the faculty members knows someone who runs an independent press. And that person heard about Mitacs from the English department chair, thought it sounded interesting, and is going to take on as an intern this English graduate student to do editing work on one of their projects. And I also point that out because you may be in a field like English or history where you're thinking, well, exactly how does my research apply, right? If you're in psychology and you're doing research on autism, it's easy to imagine, say, a community partner that needs someone to do autism research. If you're in one of the other FASS departments, the linkage might not seem quite so obvious. But one of the things that we're doing at the dean's level, Megan, can you stand up or wave your hand or something? Megan Golravesh-Vekri is working as an RA in the dean's office, specifically focused on contacting potential community partners to see if they might be able to support a FASS grad student for Mitacs-funded research. So we're still in the early stages, but we're working it. We are contacting people out in the community, trying to find people who are interested, and when we do, we will then go to departments and say, we have this opportunity, can you identify someone?
So, in terms of experiences, so would the audience like to hear more about the experience of doing community-based research from the panelists? Is that where we want to go? Do we want to hear more about how we get things off the ground? So maybe, can I have a show of hands for who would like to hear more about how to get things started? Okay, and how about the experience of doing it? Who would like to hear more about that? Okay, so we're kind of interested in the how. Okay. So I I think that actually one of the, maybe this will be interesting for the, kind of the FASS Dean's office level, is one of the, I mean, from where I sit, it's been absolutely lovely working with Nancy in public policy and their co-op coordinator, Eva Lewis, in terms of kind of bootstrapping some of these opportunities in order to grow and provide some kind of larger things. Nancy, maybe you can speak to a little bit more about how you start into these.
Well, as I said, we do have a mandatory co-op, but the other thing I should point out is a lot of the students, we also have a thesis-like project. So our kind of ideal is that their co-op and their thesis align. So because we're doing community-based research predominantly, it's good to have community people that you can contact. I mean, that would be kind of a necessary condition. So we try to align that so that the student gets the experience perhaps working for the community-based partner and then translates that into his or her thesis, capstone. So that's kind of the overarching objective there. And as I said earlier, we do start with our network. A student will, I have a bunch of them now. Reason I was a little late is I had two of them coming up and going like, who do you think would be interested in? And one was one of our students works for a seniors association, and he's working on seniors care and improving, transition from home to assisted living. And so he's very interested. He's going to write his thesis on it. He wants to partner with a community-based organization. So working with Allison and working with the organization, we come up with a project. So what Allison said is, you need a project. It is not like a SSHRC grant. Nothing like a SSHRC grant. The project is what, Allison? A couple of pages, where you have to have a decent project, you have to have a research methodology, you have to have an intended outcome. The student writes that up. You go to the partner says, yes, this is great, we need to know about this. Then you let Allison do the rest, and she's just been fabulous, and I'm not saying that because she's here, but having a liaison person enables you to go through the hoops much more smoothly. So now I think SFU has gotten much better at approving these things. Early days, this is before Allison and before there were as many resources into it, we had people doing internships that didn't get paid for 4 or 5 months. That's not very useful. So now it's way better. So you engage the community partner, they sign off on it, and the students on his or her way, either through their research project, working with the organization directly. So we've had, many different kinds, from social services, environmental not-for-profits, other private sector organizations. And it really is just, it's bridging the gap to say, we have people that can do cool things for you. And I find it's that the organizations just don't know about it. They have they've never, you'd say, what's Mitacs? What does it stand for? And I go, I don't know what it stands for, but they have cash. So, it's getting that awareness out. So one of the things I think things like the Dean's Office can do is using our SFU networks to make the availability of this kind of funding and interaction between the university and the community much more apparent. Yeah. There's a question, Sean.
Oh, thanks.
I probably don't need a mic. Are there any limitations to the type of research methods that are accepted? I'm just thinking of, post-qualitative research methods are maybe not as popular or well-known. No?
Yeah,
yes?
One of the nice things about... quick answer is no, there's no limit. So as a part of your application, you list 6 potential reviewers. You don't have to know them or be in contact with them. They have to be arm's length. But they're going to be people who are experts in your area. And so if you're doing qualitative work, you're going to have qualitative potential reviewers on it. So you're not going to be, your application isn't going to be sent to a computing scientist in order to review it. And Mitacs uses those external reviews in order to approve projects. So there's no limit in terms of the scope of what can be proposed. Research is a really broad thing. It can be more kind of alt-ac. There should be some hint of knowledge development, knowledge furtherment. But the scope of what gets approved is really, really broad. If reviewers have any concerns, you have the opportunity to respond to concerns. I mean, honestly, Mitacs is not in the business of not approving your work. Mitacs wants to support collaboration between academia and partner organizations. So if you have those partnerships, Mitacs wants to provide matching funds.
My suggestion for those of you that are graduate students, you can probably hear me. Oh, they can't. Marianne. Hi, Marianne. is to go to your supervisor, go to your department, because your department will have contacts. Just like the example given, it's finding the person that will know people that will know people, and you may take a few more phone calls, but get out there and say, this is an idea I have, who could be a potential partner. And we're now at the stage, because we've had quite a few of them, where the students are now coming and saying, this is what I want to work on, who do you know? If you don't know anybody, you will find people that know people and get them engaged. And I think I guess that says... I don't know what's going on, but it's not the fire drill, so we're okay. Maybe it's time to stop talking. My experience is once you get them and they understand the thing, they're pretty much hooked. Should I talk about EcoTrust?
Go for it.
Yeah. So the EcoTrust is an environmental not-for-profit. Its headquarters in the United States. Its local branches here in downtown Vancouver. I met their executive director at a function, and we were both, it was a YWCA thing, and we're just chatting. She goes, oh, what do you do? And I told her, do environmental work, and I said, what do you do? And she told me she's the ED. I said, oh, I have tons of students that want to work on these topics. That then led to one Mitacs grant, where the student worked on forestry issues. That then led to a group project in our first-year cohort class that was working on how to improve employment opportunities in coastal BC. That's really annoying. And then finally, that's led to 2 or 3 others last summer, and now we're in the process of getting 24? Yeah. Just approved 24 Mitacs internships, not necessarily all at SFU. We kind of had to agree to allow other universities in, but these are potentially, and most of the interns are not yet funded. So if you are interested in environmental research, come talk to us, because what they're trying to do is improve capacity to protect environmental values, but also develop local communities. So a lot of this is working with Indigenous communities in rural parts of BC. There's a big lab up in Prince George. And, I mean, this is just a huge success story, which is opening doors for amazing research.
Actually, can I add?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Marianne.
I really appreciate the last set of comments. One thing that, even having done it once, I'm still somewhat unsure about is, because I work primarily with First Nations organizations, what types of First Nations organizations under the current rules are eligible as partners?
That's a good question. So First Nations are treated, the bands themselves are treated as government, so ineligible, just like the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. However, the economic development corporations, so anything that's for-profit that's associated with First Nations, that's all eligible. As well as if there are any registered not-for-profit organizations, things like I've been in conversations with like Aboriginal Tourism BC and these sorts of organizations. Those are also eligible. So, and even if it's linked, like even if it's the Economic Development Corporation, like they can sponsor something on language. It doesn't have to make total sense. It doesn't have to be a forestry project.
No, and that was actually my. Sorry?
I think you're still okay, Marianne.
Okay, yeah, that was with the previous project, my experience. Sorry, it's my own echo that I think it's something. From my perspective, especially working with small rural First Nations communities, it's a really uneven field around bands that do have economic development corporations or other not-for-profits, whereas others don't. So that's kind of where I'm stuck a little bit, around the bands themselves as government being ineligible, and not in all cases those not-for-profits and economic development corporations existing.
Yeah, and Mitacs very much realizes that also. So we're always pushing to be able to support more, especially of the work that is important and valuable. So actually, there's something that it might be good for you and I to talk about offline, Marianne, in terms of something else that's in development. But yeah, so I mean, Mitacs very much wants to do more in terms of working with First Nations and supporting academics to work with First Nations. So continue to check back, and we'll talk, Marianne, too.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Mitacs and its potential with First Nations communities?
Yeah, it's I will say here at SFU, the School of Resource and Environmental Management, they've really figured it out. So they have a ton of projects in collaboration with First Nations, but that hasn't made its way into Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences quite yet. So
That's the perspective that I'm talking from, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and in terms of what Nancy was saying also about kind of growing from early success, I think that the EcoTrust example is such a nice one, because it shows how something kind of can start small and grow into larger opportunities for students in future years. So there are resources in terms of if you want information, that there's things that are particular to SFU, but also more widely available through Mitacs. So there's an online database of all previous Mitacs projects that have been funded. So you can see who in BC is doing what. You can keyword search your database. It's all on mitacs.ca under projects. So it's a great resource for folks that are interested in kind of who's working in your area. And then I would say, yeah, that database is of course not a substitute for speaking with your faculty supervisors, your colleagues, folks in the community. These are the ways that you kind of start these things going.
There's something that I'd like to add, if that's okay. So with our industry partner, we were basically talking to them, and they told us, we also work with older adults as our target audience, and they were telling us that they want to develop technology specifically for older adults, but they're not really sure what type of technology to develop and what area to focus on. So my area is brain health, but we also work with people that work with falls, and we have someone who's very well known in the industry and understands the industry. So, and maybe you can talk a little bit better about this. So in order to help this industry partner, instead of just being a one-to-one relationship, it's a cluster grant. So we have a few different experts working towards the same project to help that industry partner develop these sorts of technologies.
Mm-hmm. And that cluster is similar to the 24 internships that Nancy has with EcoTrust also. And so these are, I mean, you can apply to Mitacs to fund one block of research. You can fund multiple blocks. When you start growing proposals, and this is going to be more relevant to the faculty members in the room, when you start having larger projects, you can make them team-based, so they don't have to be all held by a single faculty member. You can bring on colleagues in your department or in your school. You can bring up collaborators at other universities in order to supervise lots of different students in lots of different areas. So Mitacs is open to all disciplines, so you can have multidisciplinary teams. So you can have health scientists and folks working in communications and computing science and policy and bench science, and kind of all coming together to do something if you want to do something super big. But yeah, so there's lots of ways of utilizing Mitacs in order to work very collaboratively, because a lot of times the research that's needed in the world isn't going to be, the solution isn't going to be through a single lens. It's going to be a multi-pronged approach that requires lots of different perspectives and methodologies in order to further it along.
Is that okay? Thank you.
About the EcoTrust environmental research that you were talking about, could that include wildlife research?
Sort of. We should talk. I mean, it's okay. Potentially. I mean, as Allison said, it's a big cluster, so it would have to fit into the bigger picture of, does that enhance the objectives of the research?
I think what you can do, one thing you can do at this point, while Megan and I are still working on getting a database together of community partners, is you're welcome to send, the grad students here are welcome to send me send me an email telling me what your research is and where you think it may be relevant, and I'll try to do a little footwork on my own to try to identify a potential community partner for you. And again, I'm Sean Zwagerman in the FASS Dean's office. You can find my email address there.
Thanks. Hi, so my question is about Innovation Boulevard. So for those of us located on the mountain, we're not, I think that we've heard of it, but we're not exactly sure what it is. So could you talk about that in terms of how it's structured and what kinds of community partnerships arise from that, and how we benefit from that here on the mountain?
Yeah. So Innovation Boulevard it's basically one big thing. It's hard to explain because in Surrey we're trying to make a community out of all the industries and all the community that is in Surrey. So we're trying to bring the research from SFU into the industries and into the community. So Innovation Boulevard is basically the core to that link between all these different entities. I don't really know how to link this back to the mountain because I'm in Surrey too. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question. Maybe you can.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't want to talk over to you.
No, go ahead. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Innovation Boulevard is actually it's an initiative that's it's in collaboration with City of Surrey, Fraser Health, and I'm sure lots of other ineligible things for Mitacs, but it's a large-scale initiative and has partnerships with SFU. And Nancy, you probably know about this probably better than I do. Also, no, okay. So they have there is an entity that is Mitacs eligible. It's associated with that, but I mean, even outside of Mitacs, it's like the scale of it, I would compare it to something like an NCE, where it's already kind of has collaborators from a variety of different spheres and academics from a variety of different research areas. And in terms of how it relates to you on the mountain, I think that it represents, and similar to something like Age Well, which is kind of you know, an NCE and is doing work at the intersection of the world and the research world.
Facilitate the link between different industries, but also with the end users that your research is focused to, so the actual community. So through Innovation Boulevard, we've actually been able to talk to people from like the Alzheimer's Society, for example, which give us valuable input on our specific research, right?
And they, I mean, so both, you know, Age Well, Innovation Boulevard, they represent folks that might be good for you to chat with because they have community partners. Yeah. They're entities that are already kind of have their neck out there, have developed those relationships, and have long-term kind of funding support behind them already. So if you see ties into how your work can augment what they're doing, I would say start chatting.
Hi, thank you everybody for coming out and answering our questions. I'm going to be a little bit selfish here and ask a question that is relevant to nobody else in this room. I'm an undergraduate student. Yikes. I know that Mitacs does have undergraduate funding opportunities. However, as I understand, it is specifically for Canadian students looking to work in U.S. organizations. If I recall correctly, it seems like this at the graduate level is much more open-ended. Is that true, or how is, like, is there any more information I can get on what's eligible and what's not?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Mitacs has a variety of programs, and what we're talking about here today and so far, it's all been under, it's something called Mitacs Accelerate. Mm-hmm. And it's open to graduate students, which include masters and PhD, as well as postdoctoral fellows. Currently, recently launched, there's opportunities for undergraduate students at colleges and polytechnics. There's hope that someday being like in the next couple of years, we'll be able to open up opportunities to undergraduate students at universities also, but we're not there quite yet. There is a host of other Mitacs programs. There's something called Elevate, which is only for postdoctoral fellows. There's a suite of programs called Global Link, and those are for undergraduate students and graduate students to conduct research at a university in an international country, which can include, but it's not limited to the US. Lots of other spots are open too, including anywhere in the EU, Japan, Korea, China, India, Mexico, Brazil, the Netherlands is in the EU, but lots of opportunities there, yeah, I think, and the other one is a science policy fellowship. So for PhD students who are graduating shortly, postdocs, faculty members who want to take a secondment from their academic lives, it's an opportunity to work with federal or provincial governments. And that's a very, very quick overview. There's lots more information on the website, and I'm more than happy to chat and follow up. I just don't want to spend too much time going down to the nitty-gritty of all of those individual programs, because that's just not fun on a Friday.
Yeah, I just had a second question, if that is okay, sure. More related to everybody in the room, I guess. So What kind of relationships have you seen foster post the internship? I mean, in terms of transitioning from academia to industry, and what kind of careers? Is it as, prestigious for people? Do you see like a really high retention rate for, these sort of companies that are hiring academics for all intents and purposes?
Yeah, about 1/3 of students that do a Mitacs Accelerate internship are hired by the partner with whom they've done that internship. I'm sure that there's lots of others that that experience has led them to other sorts of careers in private or public sector, and has helped them to develop networks that have facilitated other things. So it's a great way of stepping outside of the academic sphere in terms of possibilities. Other students go on to academic jobs after they've done these sorts of things. You don't limit yourself to a non-academic career once you've done a Mitacs Accelerate by any means, but broadening the horizons, I suppose.
It's viewed as, I would say it's viewed positively on students' resumes, their CVs. The fact that you received a grant as a graduate student and engaged with the community partner does nothing but good things for you. So as Allison said, it may not lead you to work for the direct community sponsor, but you've acquired that network and they see what you've done and you deliver a project at the end. So that's nothing but good. You should just go to graduate school and then instead of waiting for Mitacs to come to you, come to us.
Yeah, I'm curious about the day-to-day from the sample that we have here of the students. If this is not directly related to your thesis or to your own research, do you still have time to work on your research? How do the two overlap? Where do you spend most of your time? Is it with the organization? Is it at SFU with your supervisor? So if you can tell us a bit more about how that worked out for you.
Yeah. Well, my Mitacs project, it is related to my PhD work. So my PhD is focused on understanding how lifestyle can help maintain cognitive health in older adults. And my Mitacs project is understanding how different sorts of technology, specifically commercial EEG systems, can help at-home users get a measure of that cognitive health. And so tracking that measure over time, depending on their lifestyle, goes very much in link with what I am doing and what I'm interested in. In terms of how much time I spend at the university and with the industry partner, it's basically 50-50. Yeah, it is great because, at least for me, and going in line with what you were saying, I don't see myself going through the academic path after I finish my PhD. I'm interested in going into the industry. And I was kind of fearful when I started my PhD that the only work experience I was going to have was ITA'd. And that probably wouldn't be enough for me once I went into the industry. And this Mitacs project really helped build that connection and help the industry understand what is it that I do and how that translates into what they're interested in. So yeah.
Sorry, I forget the question. Oh, all of the day-to-day. Okay, I guess, so my experience was kind of probably different than most people's because I defended my thesis in February and I started the internship in January, and then I had one more semester this past summer that I was finishing up some other credits. Most people don't finish up credits after they finish their thesis, but this worked out really well for me because I knew I was going to be here for these 2 semesters, and this opportunity fit in perfectly. So how it worked out was the time that I spent with the Vancouver Foundation was just with the one partner, Lydia Kameni, there, and I didn't really have to be there very much. We met about every 2 or 3 weeks and talked about how the project was developing and what I had produced so far and where we want to go next. There was a lot involved. There was like 18 deliverables. There's all kinds of stuff going on the whole time. It was like 2 phases of research. So there was a lot of just us collaboratively coming up with what's next and how it should happen and how it would unfold. And then the rest of the time, I fortunately was able to just do the data analysis on the SFU campus in Vancouver. So it was nice that it was very flexible, and I was able to just do the research in chunks of time that made sense to me, and then still, finish up the thesis and the revisions, and then get into the coursework in the summer. And it was very flexible. I can't really say like what percentage of time was there versus, a lot more of it was just me on the computer doing the work than was in the meetings with the partner. But I think that wasn't a huge part of the kind of research that I was doing, and it was more important to just have those like collaborative meetings to have the project develop that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so me it was a bit similar, or it is a bit similar. So we have regular meetings, and if there's anything, there's sort of email communications or phone communications. My research was at the Burnaby Center for Mental Health and Addiction, so this is where we were actually collecting data. So I was spending a lot of time there, but otherwise, I think Mitacs generally requires 50-50. I think that's what it is. I don't know how much people follow that exactly. But, the partner industry has to provide an office for you. And I think it's really good to go there and make sure to establish a good rapport and to always communicate about what is going on. It's nice to have that continuity. So I really encourage, if you get an office space, go there and use that 50% of your time, if you can, to actually go to the partner industry.
I'll just give one example of the student that went up to Prince George. She spent 4 months up there. The community partner through EcoTrust, they embraced her in the community. She got all this on the ground research done, and it was fabulous. And that ranges, if you're working on things in town, you're more likely to do the 50-50, but she was 100% with the partner that whole time. So it really, why does it do it to me? Is it me? It depends on the partner and the research, really. I've got a current one that'll be spending time, and it will be closer to 50-50.
Marianne, could you tell us what kind of work the student that you're familiar with has been doing? What specifically the research has been about?
The research was dealt with First Nations language acquisition among second language learners in a community program.
And was that student, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Pardon me? Yeah, so this was a postdoctoral student, and I can't tell you too much more in detail right now, but the Mitacs project was satisfactorily completed.
Okay, thanks. Are there other questions from the audience?
And maybe just before we pop into those, the requirement for Mitacs, it's actually more flexible than 50-50. You'll be happy to know. It's a time share. 25, anywhere between 25 and 75% of the time can be spent directly in collaboration with the partner. The spirit behind the program is that the students have an experience outside of what they would in the span of their normal academic existence. So, whatever happens, as long as it's in support of the spirit of that program, Mitacs is happy.
Thank you. So this is actually a very similar question to the last one, but I guess from Mitacs' perspective and from the university's perspective, I wondered what the ideal sort of timing of this kind of project might be. Like, for example, if you're, a PhD student, would one sort of do this as like a fun side thing, for 4 months, or that might open doors in the future, or must it be directly related to the dissertation? And in that, like, how would it relate to other funding that you might have? So, for example, like, if you're working with an arts organization, contributing $7,500 is actually a large sum. So can you, try to fundraise around that at the same time? Or can you pair it with like a Shirk or a Vanier or whatever to support that research? And if so, when would you do that project? If so, lots of questions there, but.
I would, I think, send this one over to Nancy, just because you've had the most experience with the largest number of students in terms of the timing, when it's best. I'm not sure that we can actually give you an answer, but what do you think, Nancy?
Do you have a research project already underway?
Sort of.
I mean, it can happen at any time. It can happen at the formative stages. Just somebody else want to talk for me? It's maybe it's the tone of my voice. Maybe I'll lower my voice and see if it happens. It can be a formative time in your research where you're working with the community partner to say, what is, my current student that's working on this is working with better, whatever BEST stands for, transportation. She's working again on social isolation among elderly people and how public transportation can help. So she's at the formative stage of her thesis, and so working with the community partner, she gets to zero in more on what have you already done, where can I add value, or she can add value, and that then makes her thesis way more targeted. So it can happen there. It can happen partway through when you've got an idea and you want to take it out and you want to engage more with community partners. So it can happen there. So, I mean, Allison, I guess you would say any stage along the process, but ideally from the pedagogical, the educational point of view, kind of it should relate to what you want to do. I mean, that's the spirit of it. It could be, some of our students, the co-ops have been different, and they don't end up writing their thesis on it, but they still get that experience of engaging with the community. So I'd say any stage. But, kind of at the formative stage is kind of a cool way to do it, because it may help shape your research in a way that is much more outward-looking than navel-gazing. So, Allison, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, we have 3 students that we have a master's, a PhD, and a postdoc. I mean, so in some ways, do you want to comment on how it fit with where you were at in your educational attainment?
I think I already talked a little bit about how my project goes in line with my PhD.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that I did the Mitacs internship after I defended my thesis, so it was not related to my research that I did for my thesis, but it was actually more closely related to the research that I did for my undergrad honors thesis, oddly enough. So it was something that I was very, very interested in, and something that I was good at researching and knowledgeable about, yeah, I think that it was good for me because my thesis was all qualitative, and I was really missing doing quantitative research, and I was able to do quantitative research in this internship, so that was the value and the timing for me.
As a postdoc, I don't have to hand in a thesis, so but yes, what I'm doing here at BCMHA, the lighting intervention study with BC Hydro, is my research. So this is what I will be published, this is what I'm presenting at conferences. But for me, it was really, I really want to bring this information out into the real world, so it is applying the area that I'm researching in the real world.
I just had a question about research ethics, and just because of partnering with organizations, I can't really even envision how this would work in terms of applying for ethics approval here at SFU. Who would monitor? How would amendments be made? That sort of thing.
It's through SFU.
It is through SFU. Okay, it all goes through SFU. And we have to name partner organizations, I would assume, in ethics. I mean, we're going to have a whole new process for that very soon.
Yeah,
it's happening already.
Yeah,
it's happening.
yeah. I don't think it'll be online till January.
So if you're
but,
dealing with human subjects, you have to go through the ethics approval process before the money is released. You can engage in the application, but ORS will not approve any of the funding till you have your ethics approval. And, you know, engaging with community partners, kind of, I mean, people. So ethics and people go together, so you're pretty much guaranteed, unless the project is, I mean, you know, purely, one of our projects did not because it was purely jurisdictional scans and, you know, didn't have interviews or any surveys or anything in the ethics connection context. But yeah, you go through SFU. Thank you.
And one thing that I would add on that is if there's no interest in doing anything academically leaning as a part of the project, like if it's not going to be part of the theory because the academics don't want to publish it, it's been my experience in the past that there's an exemption from ethics for those cases. But if you go that way, like you have to be really sure that you're like not going to find something really cool and not publish it, right? So I mean, like there's SFU, I find has been really lovely in terms of like figuring out ways of making things work based on timelines and these sorts of things. Yeah, and I can help with those sorts of things, like on the outside of talking about projects too, in terms of figuring out what the appropriate, when to do what for ethics and applying to my
Hi. My question is related to more of the process. So I'm myself trying to get the Mitacs Accelerate internship, and I'm having trouble in kind of finding the industry partner. I know what are the domains I'm interested in, what kind of role I want to do my internship in, but then what would you suggest to like kind of find an industry partner? I went through the list of projects that's there, but there was nothing related to user experience research, which happens to be my interest. So what would you suggest would be a good approach to, like, you know, find an industry partner?
I think it's really good to think, maybe it requires a little bit of a different thinking than academics generally do. So it's less so, you know, who might be interested in it for the sake of interest, but who actually can really benefit from what you're doing. And benefit generally means financially benefit from. This is the world outside of university. It's all about, you know, how to save money. So I think sometimes it requires a bit of creativity. I was at first very surprised. Why is BC Hydro interested in lighting intervention studies? But they're interested in energy efficiency and LED lighting as energy. Like, I would not have made that connection. So sometimes it's fun, interesting who is actually interested in what you do. But I think, you know, just even starting to talk about what you do with your community, with your friends, getting the word out there, I think that is good way to start. But yeah, think about who actually might really benefit from what you're doing. Who might be interested in knowing what you do, and then just start getting in touch with people. And the more people you get to know, the more you will learn who you should be knowing. And
I would say, too, to talk to faculty members that you know. Some faculty members, their network will be exclusively academic, but that's not going to be true for everyone, as is the case with the forthcoming internship in English that I mentioned. Somebody, a faculty member in the department, just happened to know someone who ran an independent press that was in need of a researcher with editing and writing skills. So I would definitely say talk to all the faculty members you know and tell them what you're doing if they don't already know, and ask them if they have any contacts in the nonprofit or the for-profit sector.
I'd suggest also talking, depending on your research, and you just gave a couple words on it. There are foundations. So, like going through the Vancouver there are organizations that do broad-based, different applications. So they're interested in social capital, developing communities. Is Surrey First a government? I don't think Surrey First is not. Surrey. So there are things within municipalities. There are foundations. These have broad-based different things. United Way, they're ones that So think more broadly. That the industry partner can be a foundation, can be somebody that would have the YWCA. All these things have. I'm thinking in terms of humanities and social science. These are These are eligible Mitacs groups that may just love your project.
Thanks. I want to go back to the question about organizations for whom $7,500 would be an exorbitant amount of money. Any words of wisdom on that? Like, can you work with 2 organizations as partners? Or is there, yeah, go ahead.
Is there a mechanism to
Yeah, so it's not a problem at all to work with multiple partners on a given internship. So if you have a research project that might be of interest to more than one partner organization, they can each kick in different amounts of money. You can even potentially have an honorary partner on there where somebody else is contributing funds, and and somebody else is working directly with the student. So there's lots of ways. I mean, everything in this is going to be a case-by-case basis, so will require us to, kind of talk more offline. In terms of bringing your own funds, that one's a little bit touchier. So, I mean, the spirit of Mitacs programs is not philanthropy. So we want to be supporting collaborations between an organization and academia. So in terms of how funds move, Mitacs invoices the partner organization for the funds, and whatever happens there. Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor?
Hi, thank you. I had a question about reviewers. Do these reviewers come from academia or not? Because I have a project in mind, and it's based, on evolutionary psychology and how humans develop, blah, blah, blah. That's the science behind it. But the interesting part is I think we can predict a population of kids who are likely to develop dyslexia. So that would be the interest to the partner organizations, and I don't think they care much about evolutionary story behind it. So when I develop the project, which part should I stress for potential reviewers? Because I'm confused. Thank you.
So reviewers can be whomever makes sense for the scope of what you've proposed. They can be academics, they can be folks working in not-for-profits, in industry, in government, just about anything. So whatever makes sense.
one down
I was just curious if there are any limitations on who can apply for it. Since it's funded by the government, is it like SSHRC where only Canadian citizens and permanent residents can apply, or can international students?
That's my favorite question. And I mean it legitimately. There are no limitations on citizenship and Mitacs. So unlike Tri-Council funding, you don't have to be a Canadian citizen. It can be international student, permanent resident, anything like this. So, yeah.
Adding on to that question, so I'm from the CIAD department, and we are not allowed to work full-time. So is it eligible to work part-time as a Mitacs Accelerate intern?
The Mitacs doesn't really frame things in terms of the full-time, part-time, so I will say that there's been plenty of CIAD students who have had Mitacs internships. So the timeshare for Mitacs, it's, you know, some time at the university, some time at the partner organization, and it's always mixed with whatever is required for coursework or otherwise TA-ships. So my advice is make sure that it's okay with you, it's okay with your academic supervisor, and the partner organization understands how many days a week they're going to have you. So those are, I think, the important things to have lined up, and everyone clear about expectations.
We're getting near the end of our time slot. Are there any questions that haven't been asked? Anything important from our panelists that you think we've overlooked, neglected to mention?
But this is just a fabulous program. I mean, the fact that the federal government has kicked in a huge amount of money is just amazing. So I just encourage all of you to look for projects and to spread the word, because it's one of these things where I think the more we use it, the more it validates the program, so that subsequent governments think it's valuable, and hence we get to keep it. So it's something that by broadening the scope, which was, as I said at the outset and Allison said, is fabulous, spread the word. I mean, it's really is an opportunity that any student, graduate student can you know, potentially undertake.
Thanks, Nancy. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you especially to Allison and to our SFU panelists who are here. Marianne, from coming in remotely from Haida Gwaii, thank you so much. Whatever questions you have that haven't been answered, if things come to you afterwards, as I said, please feel free to email me, Sean Zwagerman. I'm the one who's been sending you all the reminder emails. All right, you know where to find me. Please feel free to contact me. If I don't know the answer, which is highly likely, I will contact Allison, who undoubtedly will. Okay, so thanks. It's really on my to-do list, near the top of my to-do list over the next 2 3/4 years that I'm in this position, to try to get more uptake of Mitacs opportunities for FASS students. So I'll do what I can. Feel free to contact me. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.